Our sermon series is Restoration Beyond the Famine. When we think of famine, our first thought might be of starvation or deprivation of food. But because of famine, characters in the Bible, such as Joseph, were changed. Famine was the motivating factor that moved populations of people from one land to another to seek refuge and a future filled with hope and promise. The famine in our lives did not involve a lack of food, rather a cancer that took our son Ryan's life way too soon. Today I would like to tell some of his story to you because Ryan's story parallels the story of Joseph in many ways. A story of famine, but woven with God's promises. A story of loss, but also a story that is not yet finished. A process of restoration only just beginning. From a very young age, Ryan was always athletic. At the age of 2, he was riding a tiny bike without training wheels. He was always at least a head taller than his peers. He could pitch a fastball at top speed. He could throw a football an incredible distance. And he could rebound a shot and put it back in the basket without any hesitation. His physical ability, along with his size, made him a standout amongst his peers. His personality was special too. Always kind and well-mannered, never conceited, always wanting to please, and finding the best in everyone. I'm not saying this because I'm his mom and I want to brag. I'm saying this because I feel God made Ryan unique for this reason. A time that only God knew was coming. Ryan needed to be recognized early on by his peers, his community, his fellow athletes, because ultimately this recognition would help God's plan unfold. Similarly, God gave Joseph special qualities too. He was recognized at a young age for being a hard worker, a dreamer, highly favored. I believe all these gifts were given to Joseph by God. Joseph used these gifts to his favor as he endured the trials in his life. Ryan would learn to do the same in his life. In August 2019, Ryan was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia. He was in the prime of his life, getting ready to start his sophomore year at East Stroudsburg University, coming off an incredible freshman year, a remarkable basketball season. Our world was rocked. The famine began. Joseph, losing his ornate robe, brothers who hated him, sold him into slavery, thrown into jail, ultimately being renamed slave. Ryan, losing his identity as an athlete, being stripped of his physique that he worked so hard to gain, moving from being called Freshman Athlete of the Year to a patient diagnosed with cancer, an unrelenting blood cancer. As Ryan's battle began, the depths of famine grew deeper. Early on in his chemo regimen, 5 infections led him to the ICU for a 3.5-week stay. With only a 10% chance of survival, Ryan beat the odds. His infections led to severe nerve damage in his legs and feet. Doctors and therapists, baffled by his health conditions, spending sleepless nights trying to find the source of infection and why his body reacted so severely to these complications. 2 weeks in a rehab hospital, relearning how to walk with severe foot drop in both feet. These stories are just a glimpse into Ryan's famine, not to upset you, not for you to relive the hell that he went through. Instead, to show you that through this severe suffering, God was working out his plan. You see, each time Ryan's journey of suffering got worse, more people came to know his story. Ryan's own faith continued to grow in his very own private way. Like a plant that has a strong foothold can weather the drought by deepening its roots further down into the ground. Ryan's roots grew deeper through his famine. But this is just the start of the unraveling, like a ball of twine being unraveled, and no matter how quickly we tried to rewrap it, it just continued to unwind. COVID and added famine for all of us added fuel to Ryan's famine. When Rye's stem cell transplant finally did take place, it put him in complete isolation for almost 40 days. No visitors, no one to touch him or hug him or help him get out of bed. A famine beyond our wildest imagination. Similar to Joseph being thrown unjustly into prison, it was a time in his famine that he wouldn't even talk about after the fact. So I have to think that Ryan, just like Joseph, relied on God's strength alone to help him survive. Ryan's comeback after his stem cell transplant. It began in July of 2020. Ryan began to feel like a person again, a version of himself, but never the same Ryan before cancer. Through conversations with Jacob Marino, Ryan began to understand that God had given him a platform. His success as an athlete, his physical size of 6'11", and now his battle with cancer gave him an avenue to be recognized. How Ryan handled his famine was being seen by others. His humble way, his lack of complaining or feeling sorry for himself, the grace he gave to others. People were watching, listening, and learning from his ways. Young people were coming to know Christ because of Ryan. The communities of Lancaster and East Stroudsburg surrounding us with love and support. A basketball team learning to pray and striving to better themselves and giving God the glory. People donating blood for the first time. People signing up to be stem cell donors. Families learning to pray together, to talk about death. Complete strangers around the world praying. And still, the famine was not yet over. Ryan relapsed in December of 2020. The comeback kid, yet again thrown into the pit of despair, so similar to Joseph's story. Why, God? Why? And yet again, more people coming to know Ryan's story. Doctors and nurses embracing us in love. More people going to the Lord in prayer. More people opening up their Bibles to find words of encouragement, searching for answers of why we have to suffer like this here on earth. And still, the famine was far from over. A flesh-eating bacteria somehow entering his body in January of 2021. I couldn't even make this story up if I tried. 3 leg surgeries, gallbladder surgery, dialysis. Meanwhile, a body ridden with cancer. The phrase, "it is finished," resonated with me at this time. As we watched Ryan's physical body deteriorate, we knew God's plan was to take Ryan to his heavenly home. But this part of the story isn't the end. Ryan's roots that grew so deep in his drought, in his famine, has created blossoms. Blossoms of every age. Blossoms that know Ryan's famine. Blossoms that are using his famine to better their own lives. Blossoms that are learning about Jesus. Blossoms that are living and loving and leading like Jesus. Blossoms that will flourish and thrive and eventually multiply. You see, we know the ending of the Joseph story from Genesis. We get to witness it, the Bible's account of how God's ultimate plan was for complete restoration for Joseph's family and nation. A restoration that is far better than the original. Ryan's beautiful presence may not physically be here with us, but his eternal life is living through all those that knew him and followed his story. The blossoms are thriving and rooting new plants grounded in God's love. Our family's story is not finished. It's far from over. Thank you.